Capcom. The home of martial artists, robots, devil hunters, and lawyers across the globe, for what seems like the past 300 years, Capcom has consistently put out a stream of high-quality, boundary-pushing, revolutionary games that always hit the mark. Okay, for real, they have had some bad ones in there too. But, for every bad game, they have 10 more games that are great. Did Devil May Cry 2 disappoint? Then fear not, because Devil May Cry 3 was a million times better. Resident Evil 6 let you down? Then you might like the constant onslaught of the more modern games in the series. The point is, Capcom have solidified themselves as one of the premier game developers and publishers over the past few decades. Today, however, we're going to talk about one of their fighting games, as is the tradition on the channel, but this isn't going to be any Capcom fighting game. Oh no. This one is set in outer space, featuring a colourful cast of characters, blocky graphics from the 90s, possibly the biggest weapon I've ever seen in any fighting game, and an appearance in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, it's time to remember the forgotten Capcom science fiction fighting game, 1996's Star Gladiator.
Star Gladiator.
Before we get into the finer details of the game's battle system, content, and development, allow me to drop a story recap. In the not-so-far-away year of 2348, mankind, having spent the last 4 centuries exploring space, has successfully maintained peaceful contact with multiple alien civilizations, and this means that people can now migrate from one planet to another. However, fearing a potential threat in the future from our new alien companions, the not-so-subtly titled Earth Federation develops a weapon using plasma energy to help defend Earth. Shortly after, Dr. Bilstein, a physicist, discovers a secret power that lets him capture energy created by the human mind, an energy source he calls plasma power. With this knowledge, Bilstein uses his research to help finish development of the Earth Federation's plasma energy weapon, and as a reward, he gets an all-expenses-paid trip to Guam or something, it doesn't matter. But in a shocking twist of fate, Bilstein is revealed to have performed experiments on human beings during his research, a highly unethical move. This leads to the rest of the Earth Federation exiling Bilstein from Earth and imprisoning him in a satellite that orbits the planet Zeta. 4 years later, an Earth Federation base is destroyed by a group of rebels calling themselves the Fourth Empire. It turns out that Bilstein secretly built himself a robot body and escaped from captivity, leading the group of rebels with the intention of world domination, a motive that a villain in a fighting game has never had before. Worried for the future of the Earth Federation creates a project that involves looking for people who can wield plasma power to try and stop Bilstein. This project is dubbed Star Gladiator. I'd love to go into detail about the game's development, but unfortunately, details about it are scarce. It was said by former Capcom employee and lead game designer of the best game of all time, Seth Killian, that Star Gladiator was meant to be a Star Wars game. But that's really all I could find about the development. Although just to touch on the Star Wars mention for a moment, because this game really does seem to be inspired by Star Wars. The weapon wielded here is clearly a lightsaber. Bilstein is meant to be Darth Vader, and the whole force of rebels and outer space vibe the game has seems to be taken from Star Wars. As far as content goes, the game has arcade, versus, training, and group battle. Arcade is your standard fare with 10 fights, and it ends with Bilstein, the final boss. Versus mode is also exactly that, versus. Training mode is fairly standard, and it won't blow you away with cool features or learning opportunities, but it displays this cool looking combo tree that lets you know all the different combinations you can do with your character. This on-screen command list is something I haven't seen before in a fighting game, and I really love its design and how it lets you know that there is always another combo for you to do at any given time. Group battle mode is just team battle from Tekken. There aren't any major differences in this game when compared to that series. You pick some characters for you and for the AI if you're playing single player, and then you fight until someone runs out of their characters. It's pretty simple. So, to sum up, you get arcade mode, which took me 10 minutes to finish, versus mode, training mode, and team battle. That's it. I don't want to be too harsh on this game since it's very much a product of its time, i.e. a 90s fighting game that isn't expected to have much single player content, but if you're playing this in the present day, you might get bored pretty quickly. Moving on, there are 12 characters in the game. Hayato, who's our protagonist, June, who admittedly has one of the coolest designs I've seen in a fighting game, Franco, who looks like a combination of Robert from the King of Fighters and Dudley from Street Fighter 3, Gamok, who reminds me of a large Ewok from Star Wars, Gore, who looks like Jasper from House of the Dead, Rimgul, who, believe it or not, is Jude's father after being experimented on by Bilstein, Saturn, who looks like a sleep paralysis demon I saw once after I passed out from having way too much sugar, Vector, not the green crocodile from Sonic, but the Capcom enemy, who kind of reminds me of Vile from Mega Man X, Zalkin, who looks like if Rivali from Breath of the Wild did some hectic lifting at the gym, and the final character. I promise you, no matter how weird you may think this final character looks, I promise you that you are nowhere near close to what the game shows you on the character select screen. The final character in Star Gladiator is Kappa. No, not the subreddit, but a cucumber. I haven't done this as a joke. This PNG file of a cucumber actually shows up in-game on the character select screen. Even though he looks like this in a match, the character designers thought he'd be best represented by a real-world image of a cucumber. I genuinely don't know how to react to this other than saying, this is the greatest character I've I can't do this, let's move on. With a cast of characters as brilliant as this, surely the gameplay would live up to expectations, right? Sadly, in my opinion, this is where Star Gladiator stumbles. If I had to describe the gameplay, it'd be like if Soul Calibur and Virtua Fighter had a baby that was born 8 months too early. Funny metaphors aside, the game doesn't control super well. Let me explain why. The game has 4 buttons. You have 2 weapon attacks, a kick, and a block button. You defeat the enemy by draining their life bar by attacking them, or by getting a ring out like in Virtua Fighter. The game has a combo system called the Plasma Combo System that lets you do a string of attacks that ends in a final damaging blow. I found that button mashing and doing this move with Hayato over and over again got me the same results. The movement of the characters is also somewhat stiff and clunky, which made me feel like I was never properly in control of their movement. I hate being negative when talking about games, but I really didn't enjoy myself that much while messing around with this game's battle system. It's a shame because I really want to like this obscure game with its wild characters and old school 3D graphics, but I don't. However, I don't think it's a flat out bad game, but I wouldn't say it's great. I need to lighten up the mood a little, for both your sake and for mine, so just give me a second. Sorry for the wait. I had to find a Dreamcast on eBay, but they're getting pretty expensive, so I had to sell one of my kidneys to afford it. Let's continue, and talk about the legacy of the series. Believe it or not, the game actually received a sequel. Released in 1998 and titled Plasma Sword: Nightmare of Bilstein for the arcades, and ported to the Dreamcast in 2000, the series also found representation in another Dreamcast classic, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Capcom went out of their way to make a Hayato sprite with moves from Star Gladiator in a 2D setting, and while he's far from being the best character in the game, he's still a lot of fun to use. And while that's all well and good, it also marked the end of the series as we know it. Star Gladiator 3 never happened, and Hayato wasn't in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Although the series has found some modern representation in the 2015 game Project Cross Zone 2 with June, and her outfit also appears as a DLC outfit for Chun-Li in Street Fighter V. With all that out of the way, I think it's best to sum up the video by saying that, while not the best fighting game I've ever played, Star Gladiator doesn't deserve to be forgotten by fighting game fans and by Capcom themselves. The idea of an intergalactic fighting game focused on bizarre characters is a great idea, and it's a shame Capcom didn't continue the series past the second game. I recommend you try this game out to get a taste of what Capcom was doing in the 90s if you want to play an obscure fighting game that's been lost to time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.